Yesterday morning I found fresh lilies on Mary's grave. They were still wet, with dew, like someone had placed them only minutes before I arrived. The air was cold, quiet, that kind of Ohio chill that sneaks under your jacket. I just stood there holding my old coffee thermos, trying to understand what I was seeing. For 7 years I'd come here every Sunday, same time, same road. Never once had I seen another bouquet, not even a wilted one. Mary wasn't from a big family, and most of our friends had drifted after the funeral. It was always just me, the headstone and the sound of wind over the field. But this time, there was a small white card tucked under the stems. My hand shook when I reached for it. The handwriting, that sharp, looping script, it couldn't be anyone else's. Jack. I hadn't spoken that name aloud in years. My brother was supposed to be dead, buried in a fire down south 3 years back. I'd driven all night to identify what was left of him, but the card was real. I turned it over in the dim morning light. 5 words pressed into the paper like a whisper. She deserved better. So did you. I felt something in my chest tighten, a mix of anger and something else I couldn't name. I looked around the cemetery, nothing but rows of stones and the rustle of dry leaves. No car tracks, no footprints in the damp soil. Just silence and that faint hum of the radio I'd left playing in my truck. A static hiss between old country songs. The lilies looked too perfect, too alive. Mary used to say lilies reminded her of clean slates. She'd plant them in spring even when the frost threatened to kill them. Said it was her way of telling the world she still believed in second chances. I leaned down and brushed my fingers over the petals. They were soft, cool, freshly cut, no doubt. And that scent, it brought back the memory of her kitchen window, where she'd hum while trimming stems and wiping the sink. Funny how memory smells before it speaks. I whispered her name like I always did. Then I looked again at the card, my breath fogging the air. Jack. If he was alive, then everything I'd told myself for years about the fire, the guilt, the silence was built on a lie. I folded the card, slipped it into my coat pocket, and walked back to the truck. The radio hissed louder when I turned the key. For a moment, I thought I heard a man's voice through the static. Just one word. Bob. Maybe I imagined it. But the hair on my arms stood straight. The road home had never felt longer or quieter. I didn't turn the radio off. Some silences are worse than static. I kept seeing those lilies in my rearview mirror glowing faintly in the morning light. Like someone had lit a candle in the fog, a sign or a warning. I wasn't sure which. But one thing was certain, someone out there remembered her same as I did. And that someone was supposed to be dead. I didn't drive straight home that morning. Instead, I pulled off at the diner on Route 31, the one with flickering neon and the smell of bacon that never quite leaves your clothes. Mary and I used to stop there after church before things got quiet between us. The coffee still tasted like burnt hope, but I needed a place to sit and think. Rain began falling in thin, straight lines, tracing little rivers down the window beside me. I unfolded the card again, careful not to smudge the ink. She deserved better. So did you. 5 words. Small but heavy. Jack's handwriting, that looping script he learned from Dad back when we painted signs for the shop. It couldn't be anyone else's. And yet, he'd been gone 3 years. Buried. Or at least that's what I'd told myself every night since. Jack and I hadn't spoken for nearly 15 years before the fire. We were partners once, Walker Brothers' garage, hand-painted on a wooden board above the bay doors. He was the dreamer. I was the one who fixed what broke. Then came the night. Everything burned. I remember the smell of oil, the flicker of orange light on his face, the shouting, then silence. By morning, there was nothing left but twisted metal and guilt. The waitress came over. Same woman who'd been there for decades. Her name tag said Linda, just like it always had. "Morning, Bob," she said, her voice, soft but worn. "You're out early for a Sunday." Couldn't sleep. She poured coffee without asking, her hands steady despite the steam. "You still take it black?" I nodded. The mug was chipped, but the warmth felt good against my palms. When she walked away, I unfolded the card again. The paper was thick, expensive, formal, and in the corner, barely visible under the light, a faint watermark, Keller Funeral Home, Dayton. My heart stuttered. That's where Jack's service had been held. I'd been there, front row next to a closed casket. They said the body inside was burned beyond recognition. I never questioned it. Maybe I didn't want to. I pulled out my old flip phone, the same one Mary used to tease me about. No camera, no maps, just numbers. I scrolled to Sheriff Hayes. He'd been there the night of the fire too, helped pull me out when the roof caved in. When his voice came through, it was slower than I remembered. "Walker," he said. "Been a while." "Yeah," I said. "Listen, I found something at Mary's grave this morning." Silence. "Then you okay? I don't know." "The note. It's signed like Jack. Even looks like him." Static filled the line for a few seconds, that kind of pause a man takes when he's weighing what not to say. "Where are you?" "Route 31 Diner." "Stay there. I'll be by in 20. I hung up and looked through the rain-streaked glass. My truck sat under the old oak wipers, twitching like nervous hands. And beyond the fence, through the fog, I thought I saw another car, an old blue Ford, same model Jack drove back in '92. The taillights flickered once, then vanished into the gray. Inside, the radio above the counter hissed, cutting through the clatter of dishes. A country song drifted in, the same one Mary loved, the one about second chances. Then the signal broke, and for half a breath I heard that same whisper again, "Bob." Linda looked over. "You say something." I forced a smile. "Just talking to ghosts." She chuckled, though her eyes lingered a moment too long. Outside, the rain fell heavier, drumming on the roof like a warning. And I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. If Jack was alive, he wasn't hiding from the world. He was hiding from me. Sheriff Hayes showed up half an hour later, his cruiser's headlights cutting through the rain. He was heavier now, slower too, but his handshake still had that same quiet steadiness that made a man trust him. When he slid into the booth across from me, he ordered black coffee before saying a word. Then he just looked at me. Really looked like he was measuring how much of the past I could stand to face this time. "All right," he said, voice low. "Show me what you found." I passed him the folded card. He turned it over, eyes narrowing the way they used to when something didn't add up on a report. When he read the words, I saw something flicker behind his calm. Not surprise exactly, but recognition. "You're sure this was at Mary's grave?" "Positive," I said. "Still wet with dew when I found it." He nodded slowly. "Jack's handwriting," he said after a moment. "No doubt about it." His tone sent a chill through me, not because of what he said, but because he didn't sound surprised. "You sound like you knew he might be alive." Hayes sipped his coffee, watching the steam. "I didn't say that. But there were questions. Back then." "What kind of questions?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "The fire report never matched the story. Body found in the rubble had no dental records, no clear ID. Only thing we went by was that watch, the one you swore belonged to Jack." I blinked. "Yeah, the silver one. Dad's old watch." I recognized the engraving. Hayes nodded. "That's what we thought too. But the engraving was half melted. Could have belonged to anyone. The rain outside softened, turning to mist against the glass. I felt the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. "Why didn't you tell me this?" "Because you were barely standing that day, Bob," he said quietly. "You'd lost your brother and your shop. You didn't need another ghost to chase." I looked down at my hands, calloused, trembling slightly around the mug. "He wasn't just my brother," I said. "He was the part of me that broke first." Hayes sighed. "Maybe he didn't die. Maybe he wanted you to think he did. Why the hell would he do that?" The sheriff's eyes softened. "Maybe guilt burns slower than gasoline." I stared at him, trying to read between the lines. Something in his face told me there was more, something he'd kept buried under duty and time. "What aren't you telling me, Hayes?" He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope yellowed around the edges. "Got this in the mail 2 weeks ago," he said. "No return address. Thought it was some crank letter." He slid it across the table. My name was on the front, Robert Walker, written in the same hand that signed the card. Jack's. My stomach turned as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph, old grainy Polaroid style. It showed a burned-out building, and in front of it a man standing beside a pickup truck. He wore a dark coat, his head turned slightly toward the camera. Even through the blur, I knew that posture, that tilt of the shoulders. It was Jack. Underneath in blue ink, someone had written, "I didn't die. You were supposed to." The diner felt colder suddenly, like someone had opened a door I couldn't see. The radio above us hissed again, caught between stations. I thought I heard the faint echo of laughter. His laughter, before it vanished into static. Hayes exhaled. "You see why I came." I nodded slowly, my pulse heavy in my throat. "I think he's back," I whispered. Hayes leaned back, eyes on the rain. "Then we better find out what he wants before he finds you first." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside the house felt louder than it should have. The creak of the porch, swing the wind through the gutters, the slow ticking pulse of the old wall clock. Even the rain had a rhythm that felt like footsteps. I sat in my chair by the window, the one Mary used to call my thinking spot. A cup of coffee had gone cold beside me, and the photo Hayes gave me lay on the table face up. Jack stood there frozen in that moment. Same build, same posture. I stared until the edges of the picture blurred. If he'd survived the fire, then he'd been hiding all these years. But why come back now? Why leave flowers for Mary? And a message for me? The clock struck 2. The house groaned, like it was remembering something. That's when I heard it faint, but clear, the low hum of an engine outside. Not passing by, not moving, just idling. I stood and looked through the curtain. The rain was lighter now, mist swirling under the street lamp. At the edge of my driveway, a car sat half hidden behind the maple tree, an old Ford Blue as the one I'd seen at the diner. I froze, watching. The headlights were off, but I could see the shape of a man behind the wheel. I reached for the flashlight on the counter, the same one I used to carry in the garage. By the time I stepped outside, the car was gone. No sound, no taillights, just the smell of exhaust hanging in the air. I walked to the end of the drive anyway, gravel crunching under my boots. The rain kissed my face, soft but cold. When I turned back toward the porch, I saw something sitting on the top step, a small tin box. I crouched down, wiped the rain from its lid. There was a single initial scratched into the metal J. My stomach tightened. Inside were 3 things: a rusted lighter, a folded note, and a photograph of Mary and me taken the summer before she died. Her smile looked almost alive in that shot, and I could still remember the smell of cut grass that day. but the back of the photo had something written on it in Jack's hand. "You never told her the truth." I just stood there, the rain dripping from my hair, reading those words again and again. The lighter I knew it instantly. It was the same Zippo Dad carried through the war, the one Jack swore disappeared in the fire. It still smelled faintly of kerosene. My hands shook as I unfolded the note. "You left me in there, brother. You saved yourself. But it's my turn now." The porch light flickered. The wind carried the faintest sound of a truck engine. Not near, not far, but enough to raise the hairs on my arms. Somewhere, in that darkness, he was close, watching. I went back inside and locked every door. The old floorboards creaked under my boots, the kind of sound that reminds you you're still alive for now. I set the tin box on the kitchen table and stared at it under the weak yellow light. The clock ticked behind me, slow and steady, like a countdown. Mary used to say, "Forgiveness is a choice you make once, but regret is a choice that keeps making you." I never understood that until now. If Jack was out there, if he wanted something, I knew this wasn't just about the fire. This was about everything that came before it. I looked out the window one more time before turning off the light. The rain had stopped, but in the puddle at the end of the driveway, I saw tire tracks, fresh ones, heading back toward town. And right then, I knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. By morning, the rain had passed, leaving the world heavy with fog. The kind that muffles sound and makes even familiar roads look strange. I drove toward town with the tin box on the seat beside me, the metal clinking against the thermos with every bump. The coffee tasted bitter. Sleep hadn't done a thing to quiet my mind. I kept seeing that line from Jack's note. "You left me in there, brother." It replayed in my head with every turn of the wheels. Maybe it was guilt talking, or maybe it was memory trying to rewrite itself. But the truth was simpler and harder. I didn't know if I'd left him, or if he'd already been gone when the roof came down. The road into town cut past the old scrapyard, what used to be Walker Brothers' garage before the fire. Now it was fenced off, half swallowed by weeds and rust. For years I'd avoided even driving near it. But today I slowed down, rolled to a stop. The gate hung open, one hinge broken, swinging slow in the breeze. Something about it felt wrong. I stepped out, boots sinking into soft mud. The air still carried the faint scent of burnt metal, even after all these years. Inside, the skeleton of the garage stood like a graveyard, twisted beams, scattered tools, a melted sign that once carried our name. And near the back, under a collapsed section of roof, something caught the light. I brushed away dirt and ash until I saw it, a small piece of glass half buried. A photograph sealed under cracked plastic. It was old, warped by heat, but I could still make out the faces, the me, Jack, and Dad standing in front of the shop the day we opened it. On the back, someone had written in fresh blue ink, "It started here. It ends here." A gust of wind blew through and I heard a sound faint like a footstep. I turned fast, flashlight beam slicing through the fog. Nothing. Just the rustle of an old tarp flapping against the frame. Still, my heart hammered. I could feel eyes on me. Then I saw them, two fresh footprints in the soot leading toward the far door. I followed, slow, careful. The door creaked open to the empty yard beyond. That's when I noticed it. A truck parked by the fence. Old Ford. Blue paint, faded rust on the bumper. The same one I'd seen outside my house. I stepped closer, my breath fogging in the cold air. The driver's door was slightly ajar. Inside, on the seat, was a single white lily, just like the ones left on Mary's grave. And underneath it, a cassette tape. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. The label was handwritten in Jack's unmistakable scrawl. "For Bob, play it alone." I pocketed it and looked around, scanning the tree line. A shape moved just beyond the fog, tall, slow, familiar. Then it was gone. I called out, voice cracking. "Jack," no answer. Only the echo of my own voice. The tape felt heavy in my hand. Whatever was on it, I wasn't ready. Not yet. I climbed back into my truck and sat there for a long while, the sound of rain dripping from the roof like a ticking clock. When I finally turned the key, the radio came alive with static again, and beneath it, faint, but there was the sound of breathing. Just one slow exhale, followed by a whisper. "You found it." I slammed the radio off, heart pounding. The fog outside had thickened, swallowing the world whole. Somewhere out there, my brother was alive, and he was waiting for me to listen. I didn't play the tape right away. It sat on the kitchen table that night next to the lighter and the tin box like an uninvited guest. I poured myself a drink instead, bourbon 2 fingers, and watched the rain return against the window. The house felt smaller with every passing minute. Around midnight, I gave in. I dug out the old cassette player from the hall closet, the same one Mary used when she recorded songs off the radio. The buttons stuck a little, but it still worked. When I slid the tape in, the machine gave a tired click. Then came the hiss of static and Jack's voice. "Bob," he said, slow, deliberate. "If you're hearing this, then you've found the box." His tone was calm. Too calm. "You've probably told yourself a lot of stories about what happened that night." "I know I have." A long pause followed, the kind filled with breath and ghosts. "I didn't die in that fire. I walked out. You didn't see me, but I saw you. I watched you drive away." My throat tightened. I wanted to stop the tape, but I couldn't move. Jack's voice carried the same gravel and warmth. It always had the sound of my childhood, the sound I'd buried. "You didn't light that fire, Bob." "I did." The words hit like a fist. He laughed once, a low, bitter sound. "I thought if I burned it all down, I could start clean. I didn't know you'd come back for the tools that night. You shouldn't have been there." The sound of rain bled faintly through the recording, as if it had been made outside. "I wanted to tell you the truth before I left, but I didn't think you'd ever forgive me. So I let you think I was dead. Maybe I deserved to be." I pressed. Pause, my breath shaking. The room felt too quiet. I stared at the cassette deck, half hoping it would melt away like the memories had tried to. But I needed to know the rest. I hit play again. "There's something else," Jack said, voice lower now. Mary knew. The glass in my hand slipped bourbon, spilling across the table. She found out a week before she passed. She came to see me, said she'd tell you the truth herself. But she never got the chance. You know how she died, but not why. The tape crackled, distorted by wind or maybe fire from long ago. Then his tone changed, softer, almost pleading. "I'm not here to hurt you, Bob, but I need you to come back to the beginning, the place where it all started." The garage wasn't the end. It was a message. The tape clicked to silence. I stared at it, waiting for more, but nothing came. Just that soft, whirring sound of the player spinning empty air. I leaned back, hands gripping the edge of the table. Mary knew. The words echoed like thunder in my chest. She'd known about Jack, about the fire, and she'd kept it from me. Maybe out of mercy, maybe out of fear. Either way, the truth had been sitting under my roof the whole time. I looked toward the window. Outside, the rain had turned to mist again, silver under the porch light. And for just a second, through the blur, I saw a figure standing by the truck. Still, watching. When I blinked, he was gone. The radio on the counter came to life by itself, whispering through static. A man's voice, distant but familiar. Meet me where it started. I felt something shift deep inside me, then not fear, not anger, but a strange kind of clarity. Whatever waited there, I had to face it. For Jack. For Mary. For the man I used to be. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. The tape left no room for doubt. Jack wanted me back at the garage. The place where everything burned. Where our lives split in half. I hadn't stepped foot there in years, but the moment I heard his voice say, "Meet me where it started," I knew that's where this would end. The sky was gray, low, and restless. I poured coffee into my old thermos, slipped the lighter into my coat pocket, and grabbed the tape. Something about carrying all of it together felt like walking with ghosts, the objects that survived longer than the people. Before I left, I stood by Mary's photo on the wall, the one where she's holding a daisy. "I'm going," I whispered. "If you knew." I need to understand why. The drive out to the old lot was quiet, except for the soft hum of the truck engine. Every road looked like memory. The long stretch past the silos. The bridge over Maple Creek. The curve where Jack once taught me how to downshift smooth. The fog clung to everything, wrapping the world in half-light. When I reached the fence, it was already open. Fresh tire tracks carved through the mud. I killed the engine and listened. No birds, no wind. Just the slow drip of water from the broken gutter. I stepped inside the gravel, crunching under my boots. The garage looked smaller in daylight, like grief had shrunk it over time. The same charred beams still reached toward the sky, black and skeletal. I could smell the faint tang of oil and rust. It was almost comforting, almost home. Then I heard it, a metallic thud deep inside. I froze, heart pounding. The sound came again, softer this time. I followed it past the burned-out workbench, where our father's wrench set still lay, fused together by heat. The noise led me to the old office door, the one that used to stick in summer. Now, it hung crooked on one hinge. When I pushed it open, the smell of wet ash and mold hit hard. Papers lay scattered across the floor, some old, some new. And on the desk, a tape recorder. Another one. This one had a note taped to it, written in the same sharp handwriting, "Press play, Bob." I took a breath and did as told. The tape hissed, then crackled. Jack's voice came through again. "Didn't think you'd actually come," he said, tone almost teasing. "But you always were, the stubborn one." He laughed, a quiet, tired sound. "You were right to walk away back then." I wasn't. I thought I could fix everything by burning it down. But all I did was make you carry the blame. I swallowed hard. "Jack, where are you?" I whispered to the empty room. As if he'd heard, his voice continued. "I tried to tell her, Bob. Mary. I told her what really happened. She said she'd help me set things right. But she died before she could." The words pressed against my chest like a weight. The rain outside had started again. Soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat against the metal roof. Jack's voice dropped lower. "If you want to find me, follow the lilies." The tape stopped. And just then a faint noise came from the doorway behind me. A drip, then another. I turned. Rainwater pooled on the floor, flowing in from a hole in the roof. It streamed across the concrete, tracing a path through the dirt, straight toward the back door. And there, half buried in the mud, was another lily. White, fresh. I picked it up, my fingers trembling. It was real cool against my skin. And under the stem, tucked with a strip of tape, was a scrap of paper. "Next Sunday." The river. I stood there a long time, listening to the rain. The radio in my truck hummed faintly from outside, a whisper through the fog. A man's voice. Jack's again came through the static. "You remember what we buried there?" And I did. God help me, I did. The river, he meant, could only be one place, Maple Creek. That bend by the sycamores where Jack and I used to fish when we were kids. It was where we hid things we didn't want Dad to find: cigarette packs, old tools, the first watch I ever broke. And years later, something else. Something we swore we'd never speak of again. For most of Sunday, I sat on the porch, staring at the rain, knowing what was coming. The air had that heavy stillness. Before a storm, the kind that makes every sound sharper. Around noon, I filled the thermos, grabbed my coat, and slipped the cassette recorder into the glove box. The lighter I kept in my pocket. It felt right, somehow. One small flame for what was coming. The road out to Maple Creek was narrow and cracked, the kind that swallows your tires if you drift too close to the shoulder. I hadn't been out there in decades. The trees leaned inward, branches dripping from the rain like they were trying to keep secrets of their own. By the time I reached the old bridge, the fog had thickened. The world looked washed out, gray and endless. I parked near the bank where the grass still remembered our footprints from years gone by. The sound of the river was slow, steady, like breathing. I got out and followed the narrow path down to the water. Every step felt like walking through memory. That's when I saw it, a small bouquet of lilies resting on the wet stones. Fresh, tied with a piece of twine the way Mary used to do when she left flowers on the table. And there beside it, something half buried in the mud. A small wooden box swollen with water. I knelt, brushed the dirt away, and pried it open. Inside was a folded map, yellowed damp, the ink smudged, and written across the top in Jack's handwriting, "You were never supposed to see this." My heart thudded slow and heavy. The map was of the creek and the old lot behind it. There were markings, red X's leading up the slope toward what looked like the backside of the garage property, a place I didn't remember. Then I heard a car door slam somewhere behind me. I froze. A figure stood at the top of the hill, tall, broad coat dark from rain. Even through the mist, I knew that silhouette. "Jack! Jack!" I shouted. My voice cracked, swallowed by the wind. He didn't move, just stood there watching. I took a step forward, slipping slightly in the mud. "Why didn't you tell me?" I called again. He turned slow, almost hesitant. For a second our eyes met, or maybe I just wanted to believe they did. Then he started walking away toward the tree line. I stumbled after him, but the fog thickened fast. By the time I reached the top, he was gone. Only tire marks remained, faint and wet. I stood there in the rain, chest tight, trying to steady my breath. When I looked down, I saw something on the ground, a silver watch half buried in mud. The back was engraved, "Time forgives all things." Dad's watch, the same one they'd pulled from the fire. I picked it up, wiped it clean. The second hand was still ticking. After all these years, a sound drifted through the trees, faint at first, then clearer. It was an old country song, distorted by static. I turned toward it. Through the fog, I saw the glow of headlights in the distance, fading slowly. The song stopped. Then came Jack's voice, carried on the radio waves, quiet, almost tender. "You were supposed to keep it safe." I felt my knees weaken, because I suddenly remembered what we'd buried near that riverbank all those years ago. And it wasn't money. It wasn't tools. It was the truth. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I parked by the river and sat there in the truck engine off the watch, ticking in my palm like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. The fog hadn't lifted, and every now and then I'd catch a flicker of light through the trees, maybe lightning, maybe headlights. Either way, I couldn't leave. Not yet. I laid the old map out across the dash, smoothing the wrinkles. Jack had marked 4 spots with those red X's, each one leading up the hill, toward the ridge behind the garage. Something about the pattern felt deliberate, like steps in a story I hadn't finished reading. The last X sat right by the edge of the creek, The same place he and I buried that box when we were kids. I got out, flashlight in hand, boots sinking into the wet earth. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy, the kind that holds its breath. I followed the markings, each one leading deeper into the trees. Every twig snap echoed like memory. After a while, I reached the spot, a patch of ground flattened by time, half swallowed by roots. I started digging with my hands, mud cold against my skin. It didn't take long before I hit something solid. Wood. I brushed it clean, pulled it free. The box was smaller than I remembered, no bigger than a shoebox. The lid creaked when I opened it. Inside were a few things that didn't belong together. A photo of me and Jack at the garage, smiling, grease on our hands. A folded newspaper clipping about the fire. And a letter, sealed edges burned. I turned it over. On the back was written in Mary's careful handwriting, "For when he's ready." My breath caught. I hadn't seen her handwriting in 7 years. The paper was soft, delicate from the damp. I opened it slowly, afraid it might fall apart. "Bob," it began. "If you're reading this, it means Jack's still out there. He told me everything about the fire, about the debt, about why he ran. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't want to break you again. You'd just started to forgive yourself for losing him. I couldn't take that from you." The words blurred for a moment as my eyes stung. He didn't mean for it to happen the way it did. He was scared, and he made a terrible choice. He asked me to keep his secret until he was ready to face you. I believed him. I still do. The letter ended with one final line underlined twice. "If you ever find him, forgive him. It's the only way this ends." I folded the letter back into the box, my hands shaking. The sound of running water filled the silence around me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. Just hollow. Like every memory I'd built had been scraped clean, leaving only the truth underneath. Then I heard movement behind me, soft, deliberate steps. I turned fast, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Nothing. Then a whisper. "You found her note." Jack's voice. Close. Too close. I spun around again, the beam catching the edge of a figure near the trees, tall, wearing a dark coat. He stepped forward, hands raised. Even in the dim light, I knew that face. Older. Scarred. Maybe. But alive. Jack. For a long second, neither of us spoke. The river moved between us. Quiet and endless. Finally, he said, "You shouldn't have come here." My throat went dry. "You left me to think you were dead." "I was," he said simply. "For a while. Maybe I still am." The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of lilies again. He looked past me toward the box in the mud. "So she told you?" I nodded. "She did." Jack's eyes softened, then filled with something I couldn't read. Regret. Maybe love. "I didn't come back to haunt you, Bob. I came back to finish it." Lightning flashed in the distance, splitting the fog in two. When it faded, he was gone again. Only his voice lingered, carried by the river. "Meet me at the bridge. One last time." I stood there by the river long after his voice faded. The fog swallowed everything. The trees, the road, even the sky. But the words stayed. "Meet me at the bridge. One last time." That bridge had been ours since we were kids. The place we'd carved our initials into the wood, swore we'd never drift apart. The place where we'd lied to each other for the first time. I took the box, the letter, and the watch, wrapped them in an old cloth, and placed them in the truck seat beside me. The engine coughed to life. Every turn of the wheels toward Maple Bridge felt heavier than the last. The air smelled of rain and iron, the scent of something ending. When I reached the bridge, the sky was turning pale, the color of cold ashes. Fog rolled off the river below like steam, thick and silent. I pulled over to the shoulder, left the headlights on low, and stepped out. The wooden planks creaked under my boots, same as they always had. Halfway across, I stopped. There he was, Jack, leaning against the railing, coat damp from mist, eyes on the water. He didn't turn when he spoke. Didn't think you'd actually come. I didn't either, I said, my breath fogging in the cold. He looked over his shoulder, then older, thinner, but undeniably him. There was a scar running from his jaw to his neck, faint but deep. Guess time didn't finish us off, he said with a half smile. I studied him a moment. Why the games? Jack. The lilies. The notes. The tapes. You could have just come home. He turned fully, then resting his arms on the rail. Home burned down a long time ago, brother. You just keep rebuilding it in your head. The words cut, but there was no anger behind them, only exhaustion. For a moment, we just listened to the river. It gurgled softly beneath us, carrying everything we'd lost. I reached into my coat and pulled out the lighter. This was in the box you left me. Jack stared at it, eyes narrowing. That old thing still works. Barely, I said. Like us. He chuckled under his breath. Then silence again. You said on the tape. Mary knew. His face changed, the kind of expression that belongs to a man who's run out of lies. She did, he said quietly. I told her everything. The day before she went. I took a step closer. You told her you started the fire. He nodded. I told her I wanted to end the insurance mess, wipe out the debt, disappear. She begged me to tell you. Said forgiveness doesn't work if the truth dies first. I clenched the railing until the wood dug into my palms. And she kept that secret for you. For both of us, he said. She thought she was sparing you. Maybe she was right. The river below reflected faint streaks of sunrise, now soft gold over gray. Jack looked at it like he was searching for something he'd lost in the current. I sent you those lilies because she used to bring them to me, Bob, even after I left. Every year on the day the shop burned, she'd leave them where the road turns. Said it was her way of forgiving me without saying it out loud. I felt my chest tighten. She never told me that. She wouldn't. She wanted you to keep believing the world was still kind. He turned then, his voice low but steady. I came back to finish what she started, to tell you everything and to let you hate me if you need to. I deserve it. I shook my head slowly. I don't hate you, Jack. I just don't know how to forgive you. He nodded once, like he'd been expecting that. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and lilies. Jack reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the railing between us. For her, he said, and for you. Before I could open it, he stepped back toward the fog. Jack, I started, but he lifted a hand. Let it go, Bob, he said softly. Some things were never meant to survive the fire. Then he was gone, swallowed whole by the mist, the sound of his boots fading into the hum of the river. I stood there until the sky turned bright, the paper still trembling in my hand. When I finally looked down, the ink had started to run from the rain. But I could still make out the first line. The truth isn't the end. It's the way back. I stayed on that bridge until the sun rose full, burning the fog away. When the light finally touched the water, it looked almost peaceful, like none of it had ever happened. But the letter in my hand said otherwise. The ink had run from the rain, but I could still read most of it. Bob, if you're reading this, then I've done what I should have done years ago. I didn't set out to destroy what we built. I just didn't know how to live with what I'd done. The fire wasn't an accident. It was my fault. But Mary, she forgave me before I could forgive myself. She said, if I ever came back, I should tell you the truth in my own voice. I read those words over and over until the letters blurred. Jack had written it in the same neat block letters he used when we worked invoices. No emotion, no plea, just truth. At the bottom, he'd scrawled one last line. Meet me where the light first hit the water. That was an old phrase between us. It meant the dock by Maple Creek, where we'd learned to fish with Dad. The first time sunlight broke through the clouds and hit the river, we thought it looked like fire made of gold. We called it the first light. I folded the letter and slid it into my pocket. Then I walked back to the truck, the wooden planks of the bridge groaning beneath each step. The wind had died, but something in the air still hummed, a quiet tension that made the hair on my arms rise. On the passenger seat sat the box, the lighter, and Mary's letter. I ran my fingers over the metal lid, tracing the scratches shaped like time itself. Everything I needed was inside that box, and everything I'd spent my life running from. The drive to the dock was short but slow. The road curved through the trees, sunlight spilling in long strips across the hood. For the first time in days, I turned the radio on. Static filled the cabin, soft at first, then broken by a voice I hadn't heard in years, Mary's. A recording. Bob, she said, gentle and clear. If you're hearing this, it means Jack found you. My grip on the wheel tightened. I told him to give you this when he was ready. I just hope you are too. Her voice trembled. I don't want you to live angry, honey. The fire took enough from you both. If he's come back, it's because he's trying to put it right. Promise me, you'll listen. Really listen. And when the time comes, forgive him. The message clicked off, replaced by static. I stared at the radio like it might breathe again. Then I pulled over, heart-pounding hands, shaking on the wheel. She'd known everything, and she still loved us both. When I reached the dock, the sun was high, and the fog had lifted. The boards were worn soft from years of weather. At the end of the dock sat another lily, fresh white, perfect. Beside it, a small brown envelope weighed down with a flat stone. The same handwriting marked the front. For you, brother. I opened it. Inside was a photograph, 2 boys barefoot, standing on that same dock with fishing poles and grins too wide for their faces. On the back, Jack had written, "We were whole once. Remember that before you decide what I deserve." I felt something crack open inside me then, not anger, not grief. Something in between. The sound of water lapped against the posts, steady, forgiving. I sat down on the edge of the dock and let my feet dangle just above the surface. Somewhere behind me, an engine started. I didn't turn around. The reflection of a truck moved across the water, blue, familiar. It paused at the bend in the road, then disappeared behind the trees. For the first time since the lilies appeared on Mary's grave, I didn't chase him. I just sat there, the letter open in my lap, and whispered the only words that still made sense. I forgive you, Jack. I forgive us both. The wind carried the words across the river, soft and sure. And for a moment, I swore I heard him answer just one word. Finally. The next morning I woke to the sound of rain again, softer this time, like the sky was remembering how to breathe. I'd fallen asleep in my chair by the window, Mary's photo still resting on my chest. The house smelled faintly of coffee and old wood, that same scent of quiet mornings long gone. For a second, I almost forgot everything. The lilies, the tapes, the bridge, the fog. But then I saw the watch on the table ticking steady, and I knew it wasn't over. I poured coffee and sat down with the letters spread out before me. Mary's, Jack's, and the one from the bridge. 3 stories that finally fit together like broken parts of the same machine. But there was one piece missing. If Jack had really meant what he said, if he was trying to end this, then there was something left he wanted me to find. I looked out the window toward the road rain, streaking down the glass in silver lines. Then I saw it. A truck, parked at the end of my driveway. Blue, old same rust spots along the bumper. My breath caught. I stepped outside rain, soaking through my shirt in seconds. The truck door was open, keys in the ignition. No one inside. On the seat, a manila folder. Across the front, written in the same hand I'd come to know too well. Last one. Inside were photos, recent ones. My house, the graveyard, the diner, all taken from a distance. And in every frame, there I was unaware, ordinary, watching me. He'd been close this whole time. At the bottom of the stack, there was one more picture grainy printed from an old security camera. It showed Jack, standing outside, a small white building hand raised like he was knocking on the door. On the window, a sign read, Maple County Veterans Hospital. I felt my pulse quicken. He'd been here. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was waiting to be found. I grabbed my keys, threw on my jacket, and drove. The rain followed me all the way out of town, tapping against the windshield like impatient fingers. By the time I reached the hospital, the clouds had started to break, streaks of pale light cutting through the gray. Inside, everything smelled of antiseptic and time. The nurse at the front desk looked up when I approached. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for a man named Jack Walker," I said, my voice low. She typed the name, slowly, eyes flicking between me and the screen. "Room 214, she said after a pause. "But sir, he's not well." I nodded. "Neither am I." The walk down that hallway felt longer than any road I'd driven. Each step echoed against the tile, like an old song trying to remember its words. When I reached the room, the door was open a crack. Inside the blinds were half-drawn sunlight spilling across a narrow bed. And there he was, Jack. Older than I remembered, thinner, his hair gray and sparse. An oxygen tube traced across his face. But when he looked up, the spark was still there. Tired, but alive. "You found me," he said, voice rasping, barely a whisper. "Yeah," I said softly. "Took me long enough." He smiled faintly. "You always were, slow in the mornings." I pulled a chair beside the bed, the floor creaking beneath me. For a while, neither of us spoke. The rain outside eased to a hush. Finally, I said, "You should have told me you were sick." He coughed, shaking his head. "Didn't want your pity. Wanted your forgiveness first." I swallowed hard. "You had it before you asked." His eyes glistened. "Mary told me you'd say that." I felt something twist in my chest. She always did know both of us, better than we knew ourselves. He chuckled weakly. "She said, if I ever made it right, I'd see her again." Maybe she was right about that too. The clock on the wall ticked steady. His breathing slowed. "Bob," he murmured, eyes closing halfway. "You keep her flowers fresh for me." "All right." I nodded, unable to speak. He smiled once more. Small, peaceful. Then the machine beside him fell silent. The rain had stopped. And for the first time in years, I realized the silence didn't hurt. It just was. The funeral was small. No service, no preacher. Just me, Sheriff Hayes, and a handful of nurses who'd cared for him in his last weeks. They said he didn't talk much except about cars, and that he kept a picture of some woman by a window. I didn't have to ask who it was. We buried him beside Mary, like he'd asked. Same hillside, same wind, through the grass, same view of the maple trees below. When they lowered the casket, I felt the strange calm of something finally finished, like a long breath held too many years. The rain didn't fall this time. Only sunlight. Soft gold forgiving. After the others left, I stayed. The graveyard was quiet, except for the faint ticking of my father's watch in my coat pocket. I took it out, ran my thumb over the engraving. Time forgives all things. Maybe he'd been right all along. I placed the lighter on Jack's headstone next to a single white lily. The flame still worked when I flicked it, burning steady against the wind. I whispered, "You've carried it long enough, brother. I'll take it from here." For a while, I just stood there. The world hushed, the air warm. Then I heard the crunch of boots behind me. It was Hayes. He stopped a few feet away, his hat in his hands. "Didn't think he'd really be gone this time," he said quietly. "Neither did I answered. He nodded, then looked at the two graves side by side. "You know, he called me last week," Hayes said. "Said he wanted to set things right. I figured it was about you." "It always was," I said, "even when it wasn't." He sighed, eyes scanning the horizon. "Man's got to know when to stop carrying the fire, Bob." I smiled faintly. I think he finally did. Hayes tipped his hat, said he'd meet me at the diner later, and walked off down the path. When his truck pulled away, the only sound left was the wind through the trees. I looked down at the graves, her name, his name side by side after all this time. Maybe that's how it was meant to end. A radio crackled somewhere faint in the distance. Hayes' cruiser probably, but for a heartbeat, I thought I heard a different sound. A voice. A man's laugh, carried on the wind, low and familiar. Then softer, another Mary's. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash through me. The memories came easy then. Jack teaching me to drive in Dad's truck. Mary humming by the sink, sun spilling across her hair. All those small, ordinary moments we never thought would matter until they were gone. I sat down on the grass between them, the soil still damp. "I think you were both right," I said softly. "About forgiveness. About letting go." The words felt strange, but lighter than I expected. "I'll keep the flowers fresh," I added. "For both of you." I took the folded letter from my pocket. Mary's first one, the one that began this whole thing, and laid it between their stones. The ink had faded, but the words still held. She'd written, "If you ever find him, forgive him. It's the only way this ends." And it had. Not the way I imagined, but maybe the way it needed to. As I stood to leave, a warm breeze brushed past, rustling the lilies. The petals swayed gently, almost like a nod. The sun slipped lower, painting the graves in amber light. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I looked out toward the horizon, where the road curved past the fields. The old blue truck sat parked in the distance, empty, quiet still. Maybe it was my eyes playing tricks, but I swear I saw a figure leaning against it for just a moment. Then the light shifted, and it was gone. I smiled. "See you on the road, brother." A week passed before I went back to the garage. The county had finally fenced the place off, but Hayes told me I could take what I wanted before they cleared it for good. The morning air smelled like damp wood and spring dust, that mix of endings and beginnings. I parked out front, turned off the truck, and just sat there for a minute, staring at the blackened frame of what used to be our world. When I finally stepped inside, the floorboards groaned like they were greeting me. I brushed cobwebs off the doorway and ran my hand over the old workbench, warped, burned, but still standing. The faint scent of motor oil lingered like memory had refused to leave. It felt strange being there without Jack, without the noise of the radio or his laugh echoing against the tin walls. In the corner, I found our old toolbox rusted shut. It took some prying, but it finally opened with a squeal. Inside were the things that outlived the fire. A wrench set a handful of bolts and a photo us younger, standing beside the old Ford with grease on our faces and that proud, foolish grin that only brothers share. Behind it lay a folded piece of paper, edges singed. I unfolded it carefully. Jack's handwriting again. "Bob, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye the way I wanted. But you found me, so maybe that's enough." This shop was never about cars. It was about time fixing what's broken, giving things another run. Maybe that's what we were trying to do, even when we messed it all up. I smiled despite the ache in my chest. He'd always had a way of turning guilt into poetry. The letter continued. "Don't rebuild the garage, brother. Leave it as it is. Let it stand as a reminder that some things can stay broken and still be beautiful. If you ever doubt that, just listen to the radio. I'll be there same as always between the static." I folded the letter and slid it into my jacket pocket. Then, I turned the old radio knob on the shelf, not expecting much. At first, only static. Then faintly the hum of a song I hadn't heard in years, the same tune Mary used to hum while trimming flowers. For a moment it filled the empty space, wrapping around the dust and silence like sunlight through smoke. I sat down on the stool by the bench, the same place I used to sit while Jack told stories about leaving town, about finding something better. Now I wondered if maybe this forgiveness peace memory was the something better he'd been chasing. Outside, the sky broke open with light. Rain drifted through the cracks in the roof, catching the sunlight falling like gold dust. It shimmered over the floor, landing on the tools, the photo, the ashes, turning everything into something almost holy. I whispered, "You finally made it home, Jack." I stayed until the song ended. When I turned the radio off, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. Just right. I picked up the photo, wiped the dust from our faces, and slipped it into my coat pocket. As I walked out, I looked back one last time. The garage stood quiet under the morning light walls, glinting like old scars, catching the Sunday. I locked the gate behind me and started the truck. The engine rumbled steady, that familiar heartbeat of a life still moving. The road ahead glistened with rain bending toward the hills. For the first time, in a long time, I didn't check the rear-view mirror. The radio came alive on its own, soft, static. Then a voice. Jack's, faint but warm. "Keep the flowers fresh, brother." I smiled through the quiet. "I will." It's been 6 months now. The seasons changed. Quiet and steady, the way they always do when you finally stop waiting for something to return. The grass over their graves has grown soft and even, and the lilies, her lilies, bloom brighter than they used to. Every Sunday I still bring a handful, even if I know someone else already has. Sometimes I find a new one waiting when I arrive, tucked against the stone. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's Jack keeping his word. The house feels different these days. Not empty, just quieter, like it's learning to breathe without the weight of ghosts. I fixed up Mary's garden again, planted the same kind of daisies she used to love. And when I water them in the evenings, the air smells just like that first summer we met, engine grease and rain on hot dirt. I kept the lighter, the watch, and the tape. They sit on the shelf above the kitchen table where the sunlight hits just right in the morning. Some days when the static hums from the old radio, I think I still hear him. A laugh under the hiss. A word half formed. Maybe forgiveness doesn't end. It just changes shape. Sheriff Hayes stops by, sometimes brings pie from the diner, pretends it's about checking up on me. But we both know it's about sitting in the silence without it feeling heavy. He still calls me Walker, like we're back in high school. And every time he leaves, he says the same thing. You did right by him. I never know what to say back. Maybe because right and wrong don't sound so different when you've lived long enough with both. Last week I went back to the garage one last time before they tore it down. The workers had already started clearing the rubble. But the old sign, Walker Brothers Garage, was still hanging there, half charred, stubborn as ever. I asked if I could keep it. Now it leans against the wall in my workshop, a reminder of what time can't erase. That night I drove out past the river, stopped on the same bridge where Jack and I last stood. The water below shimmered in the moonlight, calm, endless. I rolled down the window, turned on the radio. Static first, then faint but clear, that same old song Mary used to hum. I let it play. Didn't say a word. The wind brushed through the cab, carrying the scent of lilies again. I looked down at the passenger seat. For just a moment in the reflection of the window, I thought I saw him there. Jack smiling, eyes tired, but kind. He didn't say anything. Didn't have to. He just nodded, like we'd finally agreed on something. I reached for the lighter, flicked it once. The flame burned small and steady gold against the dark. I held it up to the window and whispered, "Here's to second chances, brother." Then I let the flame go out, watched the smoke curl away into the night. The watch ticked in my pocket, slow, patient, alive. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to drive home right away. I just sat there on that bridge, listening to the hum of the world, the sound of the river, the faint echo of a voice in the static, and the soft rain beginning again, each drop falling like a small forgiveness, one I hadn't known I'd been waiting for. Maybe that's all life really is, a long road back to the people we lost and the parts of ourselves we left behind. The radio crackled one last time before it went silent. And in that silence, I swear I heard them both. Mary's laugh, Jack's low hum, woven together like a prayer carried home by the rain. I smiled, turned off the truck, and whispered into the quiet, "I'll keep the flowers fresh." The wind answered softly, like a promise kept.